morning. Can you hear me? It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Bruno Brazil. I'm the COO of brCarbon. We'll talk about the deforestation and ways of cooperating for the control of it, which is a topic that is important to everyone who works with this market because of some simple reasons. Brazil has the largest forest, and we try to have a kind of ability for the REDS projects, especially for the public policies, because the emissions here are because of the deforestation, which bring again this topic to the center of the discussion for the ones who want to work with this carbon market. It can be private one, the government, but the news are good. The deforestation has been reducing strongly since 2021. In Brazil, the deforestation has reduced up to 13 kilometers square meters to 6, so it's half of it. In the Cerrado, so since 2022, it also has in this region of Cerrado, it has also decreased the savanna. Sorry. So this reduction of deforestation can be it is a result of an effort that comes from the government with effective public policies, as well as from the public sector through RED implementation, civil society with other projects. On the other hand, the degradation has increased in 2024. According to some data, it has increased around 60 square meters in just 1 year. That can even damage the results of emissions that we were able to reach. It is the introduction of it regarding the discussion that we will have here in this panel, and to start it. I'd like to call Cristiano Cunha. Cristiano Cunha, who is the head of SEGEN, the Federal Police Coordinator of the Brazil MAIS program. Thank you for being here. This program called Brazil MAIS is coordinated by the Federal Police, has satellite pictures of high resolution to monitor some areas, to bring warnings about fire, any other issue regarding the forest. It was created in December 2022. It was consolidated with some tools. Do you believe that the reduction of deforestation that we have here in the country can be due to the performance of this program called the Brazil MAIS? First, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity of being here. As you said, I work at the Federal Police, and I've been working in this program since the beginning of it. So it was a very difficult time when we created. There was a lot of information. It was bad for our country. Many people would say that the deforestation had reduced, and we were not sure who we should trust or which data we should use. There was lots of misunderstandings regarding it. It was complicated. There was no other tool to support us. You had to really trust one side. And besides this situation, we had another issue, which was the usage of data to go to the field, especially the repression bodies and supervision ones. I will present here, and then this way I will answer your question. I will present here the impacts and the results of this program, the new products that we intend to work with, perspectives, and a conclusion. There is a short video of 2 minutes. I will play it, and it will give you an idea of what the program is, okay? Imagine being capable of monitoring the whole national territory every day. This program enables that and offers high global technology with intelligent solutions for the protection of natural resources and the fight against organized crime. 130 satellites and generate updated data that are available in just one platform that is easy and enables alerts and automatic reports for the data crossing. More than 590 institutions that represent the whole country are part of it, integrating technology, knowledge, information, and for the public agents. There are more than 110,000 users that access information with traceability, transparency, besides all the content for the use of it. With the increase of more than 230% of the number of users from 2023, this has been growing, strengthening this with the public management. In June 2024, we had the second national meeting of users, a milestone that gathered more than 100 institutions in all levels, representing for more than 400 attendees that work on it every day, supervising this, fighting against it. This program changed many people and all the managers from the country. This program generates results and they are recognized nationally and internationally with awards that are important for the environment. This ESG module is another innovation generating analysis for the whole national territory. It's more than a tool, it's a collaborative networking with indicators and impacts that have been important. So join our Rede Mais program. And then answering your question, we needed to bring this overview. We are speaking of hundreds of institutions from all the country. There are more than 120,000 users, 212 institutions only of public defense. We have the whole support from the Ministry of the Federal Police, the Public National Security, and they support the project financially. We've already mentioned the awards here, the how robust it is about the integrity, the compliance part. The return of the investment is a lot, as you see here. So through this time, it's more than 80 million, and the return of it. So all the impact on the activities have reached more than 23 billion reais. It's a program that has 33 goals in the GDS. I've been in the public sector for more than 30 years, and I have never seen any other program with this capacity of integrating so many areas for the sustainable development. As we said, we have the ESG module that supports lots of features. It's not only numbers. I linked all the SDGs here, and you will see that there are 33 goals. And in the middle, we have all the products that Brasil Mais has, and with all the values. We've developed with the research within the program with institutions what we call super alerts, that they have this added value to some activity. So we get all the alerts, we cross information and support the increase of the effectiveness, which reflects on the capacity and the return of society. Within this ESG, we have some uh, the social environmental risk report crossing several public information and everything that the bodies have in compliance with the rural manual. So it's a report that we already have in this program, and it is delivered to everyone through the environmental secretariat of the states. They do this action because we don't have this expertise as a federal police, but there are other institutions that can do it. So that's what SEMA does. We also have the agriculture support, and for the carbon, we have the intention of creating what we have in this. Actually, what we have for the social environmental risks, we want to do the same for the carbon. And this analytical report should bring information of carbon, things about estimation for the biomass, the loss of it, the recomposition of the forest. So our focus here is on the delivery of products that will be for the repression bodies. If there is any kind of fraud, for example, the bodies that work with that will have tools to validate the credit, but also deliver the tools to the other bodies, to the environmental ones, for the maintenance of the forests, for the vegetation. So there are many players here in this program that we use that according to their skills. The idea here is to get one of the greenwashing lines and reach this report. And I bring here, actually now I answer your question. Brasil Mais doesn't can't fight deforestation and generate 1.3 blockages. Who does that are the public agents who are in the 629 institutions that are part of it, by using what we deliver to them, and then they are able to do it. The result here comes from them. They bring this impact. So SEMA from Mato Grosso, when they used the information from Brasil Mais with environmental actions, the impact on the 23 billion. I think 20% comes from Mato Grosso out of this number. It's a lot of impact, but the impact is caused because people are doing things, are changing things. So if you can see those changes here in those graphics, and the results come from them, from what they do there, because now they have information in real time. They can go there and destroy a machine, for example, and we didn't have this opportunity before, because the information was always late. You would get to the place and you wouldn't find anything. You just found the man, the worker, but you didn't find the big machine, what really promoted the deforestation, for example, all the illegal activities. And here it's not a methodological separation here, but I separated here the degradation part. Actually, there are two parts here. What is in yellow is the degradation, the selective cutting, according for the human presence, and on the right I have the fires here. And why did I separate it? Because when we speak of degradation of like lots of kilometers, then fire is different. It has a different behavior. On the left, let's say that the investment and work are according to the result. So the more money you invest in this criminal activity, the more people you put in there, the more you are able to deforest and the more you degrade. On the right, you don't need to have any high investment. You can start a fire that will burn 30% of it in a property, and it's, let's suppose it's the driest region of the biome in a place that has the capacity of making it big, because there will be a lot of biomass to burn it. So you can create a big fire, something that will be very, very bad, without investing much money, without any effort. That's why I separated both things, because when we show that, people think that there are 1 million people putting like burning everything, putting fire on it. So when we had this growth, we had a reduction of the deforestation and the degradation because of human presence, the degradation that is due to the human presence. And for the fire, you don't need the people. You can kill the animals, people, and so in 2024, we had lots of kilometers degraded by the fire. So I brought it here to show the information, because if we put everything together, it shows that there is an insurgency of people like putting fire everywhere. Of course, that we have some fires that are due to humans, but the increase that you have here, it, it was out of control. It's not people who set fire to it. It's important to remember that we've been having drier years, and the forest is more flammable, and the forest fires at I actually I call a fire something that happens in an environment that is not the forest. It's important to say that those drier years enable the spreading of fire in a bigger area. And we have to consider the project scenarios. We also have to consider this to talk, for example, as I suggested, that's the reduction. So we have this program, and it's part of the project scenario, but when you divided things, you are able to see this clearly about the investment, the reduction of deforestation, degradation. So we are having a positive climate impact. Thank you for the presentation. It was very nice. You answered my second question. I was gonna ask you if you believe that the cooperation has been working into practice to fight deforestation. I'm not going to take longer here, but I'd like to highlight what we saw in the video. What was missing? Information when it was necessary, and it should be traceable. You should really assure that that thing happened, and you should like really be sure about it. And there was a lack of qualification because my system has everything available. For example, I don't know. Maybe the audience here is of scientists and researchers, but when I go to places, then I ask the people how many images have you uploaded, and you have already done the processing to validate something, or how many alerts you have uploaded from another system, like, and then you had to use the geo processing. In 2020, it was something, it was a boundary. Only the technical body was able to absorb that. So besides not receiving information, we still had this technical limitation. So that's what Brasil Mais brings, the process qualification. We have this event that we do every year that integrates all the institutions, presented the success cases. When I say that we can attribute that to Brasil Mais, it's not myself speaking here. It's the all the institutions, and they say, okay, I be able to do today what I wasn't able to do in the past. Like the firefighters say that they are able to find like points in the beginning, and it didn't happen before because I'm not going to go into detail, but they are able to get it in the beginning, and it makes the difference in order to generate the result and the impact. Okay, I will ask the last question as we're speaking of a networking. Do you see ways of the private initiative participate in this networking and benefit from this program? Within Brasil Mais, we have a public transparency that is open to everyone, is available to everyone. You can see all the numbers, indicators in the presentation, and there is a panel. And you can check, for example, that the deforestation has increased in that region, biome, states. We do have a part that we can take to the general audience, but the Red Mais projects, for example, involving Brazil Mais, we always needed to have a partner that has the legal expertise to do it. Yes, we can develop that. We want the partnership with the universities, private sectors to develop better products that are for the carbon, as I said here. But this product will just um, go back to the private sector in case there is a one body that is expertise in it. So why am I speaking of that report of social environmental risk? Because that's the responsibility of this secretariat, and and then they can make it available to everyone. So all the Red Plus projects will be able to generate the report and make them available to the partners who are working there with them. There is the possibility. We wanted to participate in it, but it depends on the body, for example, to make it available. It's a project that generates information for the for like so in thesis you can't make it available to the public in general. For example, there are some things that we can, but there are others that we can't. The idea would have to have this body to represent that. Very good, thank you. Now I'll give the word to the next panelist, the Secretary of the Environment from Mato Grosso, in the state of Mato Grosso, Your state has been producing corn, among others, and it's been ahead the other countries in 2002, between 2021 and 2025. The production of soy increased more than 15%, cotton 1.6, and the cattle increased 25%. In the same period, the deforestation was from 2 to 1.3 thousand kilometers, and then in the savannah was also there was also a decrease. Okay, now let's ask the question: how is the government working with this reduction? Thank you for the invitation, for being here. I'd like to congratulate for the choice of topics. I'd like to thank you, Julie, who is a dear friend and has been into this fight for the development of the economy in the country. After Cristiano, it's easier to say a few words here. Bruno, I will summarize that the fiscalization has another perspective. We started a project in the past to change the way the state supervised the illegal issues, and today I can say the state of Mato Grosso is the largest user of Brazil MAIS. And I'd like to show a little bit of this history in order to get to the results. So we are still great producers of grain, soy, corn, meat, cattle. We would be, if we were a country, we would be the fourth largest one, and they still preserve 60% of our territory. So and we fight against the illegal things. That's our priority. Okay, thinking of this performance here, just for you to understand our our journey, it has 903,000 kilometers, and it has three biomes: savanna, Amazon, and Pantanal. They have different features and they have different challenges for the oversighting. So we have regions that are very difficult to access. So it's a little bit of what Cristiano explained. In 2019, when we started with the management of Mato, and then I took over the secretariat, we were not able to support all the alerts or even fight against it. Our responses were long. They would take like 2 or 3 years, and all the illicit, actually, the state was not able to act. It was the reality. We invested in technology, in monitoring real time to guide in a more effective way the planning of those supervisions. So that's the scope of it in 2019. And then the program Brazil Mais, that had the same focus, that started in 2020. We were the first users, and since then we've been applying all the tools that are available in the program, and we also applied it to the state. And as Dr. Cristiano said, it's not enough to have all the data available. We needed to guide the people in administrative process, in a strategic plan, and lead the people, so then in field they will be able to generate data with materials and will be able to generate pedagogical effects. It was one of the greatest challenges in our state. We we started receiving alerts weekly, every that were spread in 3 biomes, and then we had to have an effective plan, and we started the flow of it based on technology and qualified information. And then it was with the receiving of the alerts. We do all those alerts are sent automatically to all the data bank of the secretariat. So everyone who is registered in this body will receive the email. So they are treated, and then if there is an authorization, there is no action to be taken. And if there is no authorization, but this area is in the data bank, there is a contact with the producer to let him know about this issue. Otherwise, he will be fined. And for the areas that don't cross with the ones that are registered, then the planning is according to the qualitative information generated in real time. That's our differential. And what are the results? The alerts are qualified, so we have everything that is visible. All the work here of Brasil Mais, of the state, subsidized the recommendation in 2021, and orients the sensory control everywhere where there is deforestation, because we have a materiality of this, and it has to be turned into pedagogical effect. It is not only for a report, it leads everyone in field. We were able to get all the wrongdoers. People had more than 1,500 machines, big tractors, diggers, and other equipments. And here, speaking of the results, when we speak of our capacity regarding those illicits, in 2018, we were able to produce a little more than 600 catches, and then in the during the pandemic, we were able to increase this number to 660% without increasing the team. We're able to use everyone who we had. Everyone, we have an effective cooperation with the firefighters and with the environmental police. So, and all the response has this pedagogical effect, and this effect generated the reduction of the deforestation. And when we look at all the results, we don't have here the separation. In the Amazon in 2024, there was more than 45% of deforestation with authorization of this environmental body. If we had to extract what is from what is authorized to the other party, it would be much higher, because we combat the illegal deforestation. 40% of all the actions are done remotely. So there are more than 20,000 of it in more than 2 million of hectares that have been irrigated. So I think this number in this Brasil Mais will increase. And just for you to understand, this is the analytic panel that we have every year. This is the panel for 2025. Those are the units that are part of it. I can say that Mato Grosso has received an award in 2025 because of its performance. We got the first place, and it's all the work that we've been doing that are linked with other programs. For example, when we speak of decarbonization, Mato Grosso has 12 main strategies, and one of them is the fight against the all the illicits. So this work has as a focus on the change of the perspective, and we'll just have different results if we really promote differentiated actions. That's our goal, and Mato Grosso integrates this program called Brasil Mais, and we advocate the use of technology, the cooperation among all the institutions that are the only way of making us more effective, strategic. All the effort in our state was done with more than 300 million reais. So it's a very important action, and then it gives positive results with the quality and the technology. And today, we are totally sure that with all the conciliation, with all the violation notice, and with the legal, with the civil police, we have lots of agreements because the materiality is so consistent, and then all the infractors can correct everything. So thank you, and I'm available here. Undeniable, it's it's very clear that the increase of productivity here goes with the reduction of deforestation. Thank you. I really liked listening to you. So 25% of the deforestation can be, so it goes with the state and even the perspective of some programs, and we can differentiate that. So now, as the president of Abema, what is your perspective of the states about the national articulation and the role of this governance in this fight? I say that the Brazilian states are the players in this fight. When we speak of the competencies, we see that in the territory is in this original competency of states when we speak of the control of natural resources and the fight against deforestation. And it happens in many Brazilian states. In Abema, we focus on priority things, and one of them is to strengthen the Brazilian states in order to carry out their competencies and giving some answer regarding this combat. Abema presented a project to structure a situational room focused on the parameterization of results because and then do the crossing with the authorizations and generate indicators This project has been already approved by COFA and it's already in the BNDES for validation. It's a differentiated initiative focusing on the strengthening of the states. And then it shows that the cooperation, the strategic performance are able to change the results in the field. So that's how we are working to strengthen Rede Mais and the results that we can have nationally. As this representative, I'm very excited and I can see all this engagement that you are having regarding this fighting deforestation. Let's go to our last panelist. SCCON has been operating since 2016 and it works with lots of satellites. Those images detect, quantify, and give alerts with fast and accurate information. How can your technology be used in this fighting deforestation? Thank you, Bruno. Thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be here with my colleagues here talking about this topic that is so important, that is so updated. It's important to talk about it. It's a complex topic and it should be addressed by all the society sectors that demand a qualified dialogue. So we should be responsible for all of it. But at the same time, it demands collaborative actions among all the sectors. So it's very important to be here. And the goal of my presentation is that's my question. How can technology promote a better environment of project development and the business of carbon in Brazil? And how are we going to address? Speaking of technology, what are the responses that we'll have related to technology? And how can we innovate and make the information available? I'm not going to go into details here, but I will highlight 2 points that are very important that involve the capacity of monitoring areas, focusing on carbon and the qualified areas that can go under submission. We know that those are important projects and they are almost 50% of contribution. Actually, 50% of the projects are related to reduction, to this contribution. We also have to meet all the regulations, the audits, or even the Brazilian legislation itself, which is tangible, and talk a little bit about this monitoring and the baseline of that is also necessary for this in a consistent way, and the technology will enable this security regarding technical quality to show the evolution of the area through a according to the methodologies, and how the follow-up will be in this area to consolidate and continue with that credit, with the value of that credit. Okay, sometimes there are things that are not so clear as the alerts, dashboards, and analytics, but there is a whole architecture, a framework of technology, geospatial and informational one that will enable the firefighter, for example, to receive some information about a fire point, and the specialist also can see that. So we are speaking of a cloud solution, and we are speaking of many others. And then, so we have resolutions. All the images are processed in our platform by using the analytics. We are speaking of more than 400 computers, and all the environment has to be doubled. Actually, has to be duplicated because everything is very strict. It's it's just a fun fact here because we forget that we have this technical expertise, because it's not only showing the image or showing alert. You have to prepare a solution that has a robust data bank to do all the crossing, all the intelligence to see where it has increased, decreased, which area it is. So the traceability is very important. With everything that is generated, we have the area, we have the image with all the metadata, and then with the ISO, and that it traces everything, and then it will we know the responsibility of the usage of the data for this process to support this carbon project. Here, basically, we have an overview of what the solution is. So what is it composed by? We have the access to our platform, more than 10 million images a day that we receive from the planet. As I said, there are more than 2 million. Actually, it's every day we have lots of data being accessed. There are more than 100,000 users. It's a very simple platform, but there is a robust structure. Our analytics, when we started the project with the federal police, as well as with the SCCON, we had already a project, but actually we already had some actions, but through time, the need of the user always challenges us. But today we have more than 20 different classes. One of them was the chemical agents. Today, Mauro gave a positive feedback that all the monitoring in the field confirmed our alerts, which is very important. Even though you have a robust solution, it's important that for the user and for the manager who are not specialists, and it was something that we changed it. We should have an easy interface that will help with the time optimization. And then with this innovation process to meet all the needs, we are integrating this product from Planet that is forest carbon that is shaped to address all the methodologies. It's a product that we are disclosing this here at the first time, which is a very specialized forum. So we are available to share this with you. So it will be very nice to do kind of a research with you, and it will be much more agile, will reduce costs for the projects.
I like to highlight a new analytic generated with AI, 100% automatic, that is going to allow us to fight against, to have a better facing strategy with fire. This was a demand that was assigned to us. It was not forecasted in the project beforehand. When those disasters happened, those forest fires happened back in 2024, the Brazil Plus program was summoned, and we started offering support throughout the country. We have over 100,000 users. It was a lot of information, and we needed to improve the analytics so that we could speed things up. And we're trying to grant it for the federal police, and it's going to be available for most users. It's going to cover the whole country. From the moment you have an image that will be available in less than 24 hours, we're going to have access to the information in 2 hours. I mean, it's going to be accessible for users. There is another project mentioned by Cristiano. It is the module of ESG. This module does a risk analysis of the environmental kind. This analysis guarantees that we are able to launch a consistent project out in the market. It is used by the central bank in Brazil that became a member of Brasil MAIS, because the 048 resolution predicts that you cannot finance no project in areas that has conflicts in terms of the environmental legislation. There's over 40,000 processes generated within the Brasil Mais project. The program allows us to generate an analytic report. This report can evolve and become a future report of compliancy for conservation of a specific area that works with carbon credits. As mentioned by Cristiano a little earlier, the moment we talk about conformity, compliancy, and projects with credibility, transparency and traceability is really important. The project innovated with this issue. There's a QR code here, and it is possible for the public in general, and not only for the public entities, in order to analyze the dynamics of deforestation in the monitored areas by this project. You can filter it by state, by unit of conservation, indigenous areas, indigenous lands, and the Amazonian biome. And on the right, it offers the ranking of increase of levels of deforestation in the geographical location that was investigated. This is my last PowerPoint, and I'm going to use it to answer questions after presenting all this technological framework. And I would like to answer the question of how we address and how can technology help these projects. We are talking about the greater access of information available. the moment we make precise information available, it is important to highlight something. The lack of information and false information was mentioned in the report of one of the greatest global risks of the World Economic Forum. They enlist 36 risks, and the lack of information becomes a very important risk that involves economical questions and social environmental issues as well. And it is important to talk about that. And also the fact that you're able to offer these historical information, because the Brasil MAIS program offers information since 2017. You're able to check a timeline and a baseline regarding this area to see if it's eligible or not for this end. It is important to reduce costs and time for the projects that are being currently implemented. The most eligible projects for the thing that we're working on right now, these are the projects that engage and involve reforestation projects, degradation projects, and HEGMAIS as well. Brazil is more than ready in terms of technology and also to scale up. And we have perspective in order to continue with this project over the next 5 years, 5 or 10 years. And we have the possibility of working of carbon credits with integrity in order to guarantee transparent and efficient systems, as well as a precise one in terms of monitoring these areas. I would like to be at your disposal. And I would also like to highlight something. When it comes to technology, monitoring, and actions that consider geospatial technology, we're here compatible with any country around the world. We are successful cases. The projects were awarded a few prizes, and SEGEN, as SCCON as well. We're ready to scale this project up and support you in this opportunity for challenges and opportunities that carbon projects can open up so that we're able to fight against deforestation and degradation by promoting sustainability. Thank you all so much, and I'm at your disposal in case you have any questions. Yada, thank you so much. I feel impressed when you talk about time and geospatial resolutions. We know that we had a 3-meter geospatial map of the Brazil program, and I saw there was a number of like centimeters you can reach much more detailed resolutions. The planet has other constellations and there's other agencies as well, because planet is really unique, globally speaking. And over the next 3 years, in terms of detailing capacity, like 3 meters to cover the whole country and the whole globe on a daily basis, the symmetrical images are mostly used for specific targets because it forecasts a program. And it also considers cost. We operate with a big level of detail around the country and with the specific actions that the federal police needs before they go out in the field so that they can check the infrastructure in all its detail. And we support in terms of project and development as well. And also the time ones, because we heard about like 24 hours and now we talked about hours, right? When we acquired a certain image, we take a certain picture. we are able to upload this image, this algorithm, this AI powered analytics that will make this image accessible on the dashboard for the users, right? I think I ended up answered in your last PowerPoint slide. The next question I was about to ask you. How can the private initiative benefit from the SCON can offer? But you can add up to that. Sometimes we have no opportunities because those projects are very remarkable and they have a great impact for society as a whole on a greater scale. The SCCON has a strategy because it prioritizes and it is focused on generating qualified information by by looking for innovation and intelligence. This way, they'll be able to generate those analytical reports in order to deliver better quality information for the decision makers as well as experts. And there's a point I'd like to highlight. We have also grown around 200% per year for the private sector. We generate a similar information, very similar information. The pillars are the very same, the analytics, the platform. So you deliver that process, which is different. And for carbon projects, we have very interesting ones. We have a few projects getting started, and I'll be really pleased to engage with such engagement to contribute with the development of the carbon market in Brazil. We would like to leave you with these engagements so they're able to contact us. There's some project developers counting on the service, right? It's great to know. Last question I'd like to ask. The new methodology of Vera to Edda, it evades the logics of monitoring through the vectorial of deforestation, which was common for the red methodologies since the outlining of those red methodologies. Now we do sampling analysis per pixels, and that extrapolates as a deforestation rate for the project, even for effects of counting the level of deforestation in the region. So we don't count pixels anymore. So we rely on samples and expand. So I have to confess that I don't understand it really well because you lose the explicit geospatial factor when you do this. But well, this is the new methodology you're using, considering this and how it works. The technologies of the SCCON could be used for the development, for monitoring those red projects. Yes. Your question is really interesting. Here's some explanation. When we go back to the pixel to pixel method, what is pixel after all? It is a quadrant, a square, a small square. The more detailed information, the smaller the square. When we talk about the planet images, we are talking about a minimal area of 9 square meters. When we talk about a Landsat image, which is the main basis for the prods, we're talking about a 30 per 30 meters. We're talking about 900 square meters. We are saying that the planet images have a great detailing of the pixel, like 100 times bigger, 100 times better. This is really important because you see a vector that is generated with a much worse resolution. So at the beginning, you might think that it is more detailed, but when you go to the origin of the pixel, and when you have the origin of the data, it is a resolution, quality resolution, like a more precise one. So you have no loss in the sense you use the pixel. And the fact that you use the sampling, this is just going to, well, if you use a random sampling with a consistent statistics. Well, this is what I imagine what this methodology is about. So you're not going to have any losses, and you're going to speed up processes for your projects. But from our point of view, we end up generating the information at the pixel level, and we consolidate it. So it's really easy. I can guarantee that we could address that, and we can explain that, and to join other discussions with you. Thank you all so much. I think that our time is ending, so I'd like to ask the organizing committee if we still have time for some Q&A, like for 1 or 2 questions maybe. All right, thank you all so much. We have to rate it up. Thank you all to all our panelists. Thank you so much.